All right, welcome back to Blue by 90. I'm Justin, joined by Tanner today. It is November 20th, and we've got a marquee matchup coming to Ann Arbor this weekend. The Northwestern Wildcats. What's their record? They
They're
are
4-6.
4-6 versus the 5-5 Michigan Wolverines, which is honestly just tough to say out loud, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, hey, look, I've said this, whenever if I'm talking to somebody at work and, it comes up that I'm a Michigan fan, they're like, oh, tough year. And look, if you go back to August 2023, we're excited about last season, right? It's kind of the final, the last dance, if you will. And they're like, hey, your team's going to go 15-0, but the next year, it's not going to be as much fun. Well, I take that bet every time. That's a damn good bet.
I mean, there aren't that many teams that have gone 15-0. So
no, there's only a handful. So for Michigan to do that last year, in the last year of the college football playoff. Also, I just want to say, is Michigan cursed by the video game? Like,
true.
Jim Harbaugh comes a year or two after the game comes out, and they're 10-win consistently for the most part, and then they go on their run the last 3 years, and then the game comes back and they stink again. So
it might be the issue. That might be the issue, honestly. But I don't know. I mean, to be honest, just this weekend alone, I think. Have you been less excited for a game than this one? Like, when was the last time you were? I mean, COVID, obviously, but that doesn't really count. Even 2019, though, like I know, it wasn't an amazing year, but I felt still excited for games at that time. I unfortunately just I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I still love it. We're going to be out there tailgating. I know you're not going to be able to join, but we're going to be out at the Chrysler lot, Blue Lot, on Saturday morning, getting set up with the tailgate. So, I'm excited. I'm thinking about maybe trying to go to the game. We'll see. I mean, it's senior day, and there's a lot of guys that have contributed to massive moments in this program's history over the last, 2-3 seasons that are going to be celebrating their last time in the big house. And I know just as I'm saying this, just a guy that comes to mind is Donovan Edwards. Hasn't had the last, 2 seasons of football that he's wanted to have. But I'll tell you what, he's going to go down as somebody who made a lot of important plays for Michigan football. So I want to be there to celebrate those guys.
Him, Bredesen, Davis Warren, and then obviously a bunch of juniors that are probably not coming back too, in Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, Will Johnson.
I mean, you think about it, like some of these guys that have been, maligned by the fan base this year, like Makari Page. Makari Page was an extremely vital part of the last couple of Michigan teams. So I want to go. I think I'm talking myself into going to the game now. I mean, it's probably going to be cold, but whatever. I want to go and celebrate these guys that have made huge plays. Think about Quentin Johnson. Think about the plays he made last year. So I want to go and celebrate these guys. Miles Hinton is a guy that was a part of a national championship team and stepped in big moments. So, that's the way that I'm looking at this one. This has been great. But
thank you for bringing the vibes back up. Caleb, I'm sure he's going to yell at me for starting the pod off with bad vibes. But it's tough out here. When you have to get yourself up for a 5-5 team every week, it's tough. But I like your outlook here. I like your perspective. And you know what? Like, we are however many days away from Ohio State. And you never know what's going to happen in that game. You never know. I don't think it's going to go very well for us, but you just never know. So I'm hoping, as much as you got to go beat Northwestern, I'm really hoping that we're spending most of our time prepping for Ohio State right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, Northwestern is a team that multiple times this year has scored, single digits. If you look at how they've performed this year, it's very interesting. Like, they beat Miami, Ohio 13-6 in week 1. They lose to Washington and they score 5 points. They lose to Wisconsin and they score 3 points. They keep it somewhat close against Indiana. They only lose by 17. They put up 24. They smoke Maryland, which Maryland
smoke Maryland 37-10. That is a terrible loss for Maryland.
Right. And Maryland gets kind of a late blowout against Oregon, but like that game was 14-10 late in the first half against the number one team in the country for Maryland. So yeah, Northwestern's weird. They looked really good the first, I don't know, 20 minutes of the game against Ohio State. They had the lead. They had fumbled close to the red zone, or maybe they were in the red zone. And at one point, when they put the yardage graphic up, it was like 150-30 in favor of Northwestern over Ohio State, who's the number 2 team in the country. So, they're kind of
okay. I want to, yes, we can talk more about Northwestern, but why is it that that's how every Ohio State game goes? Every single one, like, I mean, there's like a screenshot of the first quarter where Ohio State is just struggling so bad, and a terrible team is leading them and like outdoing them just in terms of stats and everything. And then what happens usually is that bad team fucks up like one time, like throws a pick, fumble, whatever. They don't score
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, they don't score on from the 1 yard line, aka Nebraska. Like these, why is it that's how every Ohio State game seems to go?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, they're fortunate to not be sitting here at 6-3. When you or 7-3 when you think about Ohio State. So yeah, man, it's interesting with how they start.
They're gonna come for you for that comment, by the way.
What, that if Nebraska and Penn State had coaches that were worth their paycheck, they might be sitting there with 3 losses. I mean, it's just, I watched the games, and yeah, credit to Ohio State because they pulled them out. But James Franklin is a moron. And this is a good segue because I wanted to talk about this.
I agree.
Matt Rule is a loser, a dork, not a very good football coach. I think he's probably closer to what he was with the Carolina Panthers than what he did at Baylor or Temple.
The funny thing is 2 years ago, I was like, I like Matt Rule. I think he's good. I was like, that's a good hire for Nebraska. He seems to be like a guy's guy type of, person. And I was like, this is, Nebraska's going to be good. Then they get Raiola. I'm like, okay, this team is like, Nebraska's on the up and up. And then I think it's like, he is like the excuse maker of all excuse makers. Like, it feels, if I was a Nebraska fan, I'd feel like, okay, is this, it's not as bad as Scott Frost, but it is, it feels similar. It's going down that path.
Well, and you always hear like, oh, you got to coach the stink off of them, right? Referring to the previous regime. I think Matt Rule is just continuing to coach stinky.
I think that's, it's like, it's not he needs to go out there and be like, no excuses. We need to be better. Like, we need to get off of that train. But instead, it seems like he keeps making excuses.
I did see from his presser on Monday that he did say there's we're not cursed, blah, blah, blah. But then he goes and makes this comment, and I'm going to read it verbatim. So no interpretation needed. So he's talking about one of his players on defense, Deshaun Singleton. And he last year, college football rule, if you play in 4 games or less, you can redshirt. If you play in more than 4 games, you cannot redshirt. So he played in 4 games last year. Their 5th game was against Michigan. He gets hurt on the first play of the game. So I'm going to read what Matt Rule says, and then we're going to talk about how ridiculous this comment is. Obviously, everything that happened against Michigan last year seems like there's some cloak of, whatever. He got cracked on a run play. Did they know it was a run play? Is that game going to count in a couple of years? I thought he shouldn't get penalized for one play in a game that's, in my mind, is not even a real game. But the NCAA disagreed. So first off, Matt, if you go back and watch the film, Michigan does know that it's a run play because they're on offense and they called the fucking play.
They were on offense. They ran the play.
It was a read option, and he gets cracked back on by Roman Wilson, who is a $180 soaking wet. Sorry. Why are you bringing this up now?
It's crazy to me that like, I don't know if you want to be in the spotlight. One thing, if you want to say like, yeah, I'm fighting for my guys or something like that. Like, we know how those comments have come off from our own head coach lately. But like to still be bringing that up in the year 2024 when your team is having plenty of its own issues is crazy to me.
Do you know what Matt Rule's record is with 5 wins trying to get to a bowl game in the last 2 seasons?
What is it?
It's 0-8.
That's crazy.
They started 5-3 last year, finished 5-7. This year it started 5-1. They're 5-5 with bad losses mixed in there. And they've got 2 more games against Wisconsin and Iowa. Teams that I don't know the last time Nebraska beat either.
Yeah, they're looking at to go 5-1 and possibly not win a bowl game is a bad coaching job.
Yeah, he is today's Ron Zook. If you remember in 2011, I don't know why I know this. Ron Zook's Illinois team started off 6-0. They proceeded to lose 7 straight games, including the bowl game. That's what you are. You are Ron Zook, Illinois, at this point.
Yikes.
And you don't have Juice Williams,
No,
unfortunately.
right.
So are Nebraska fans content with just missing bowl games? That's what I want to know.
They must be.
I just thought that was ridiculous.
So I have a Nebraska friend who sent me this tweet. It was there. This is the most insane stat ever. Most 1-score losses in one season is Nebraska at 8 in 2021. Most 1-score losses in 2 seasons, Nebraska 21 and 22, which is 13. 3 seasons, 21 to 23, which is 18, Nebraska. 4 seasons, 21 to 24, 22 losses in 4 seasons. 5 seasons, 2020 to 2024, 25 losses in 5 seasons. 6 seasons, Nebraska. 7 seasons, Nebraska. 8 seasons, Nebraska. 9 seasons, Nebraska. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So they have the most losses, most 1-score losses in from 1 season to 16 seasons. So from 2009 to 2024, they have the most 1-score losses in 16 seasons at 55. I mean, that is at some point, like, I think you're cursed, man. I think something happened. Either that or you got the worst in-game coaches of all time.
Yeah, well, I mean, their success in the 80s and 90s is predicated upon taking walk-ons and just juicing the shit out of them. That's why I like when Nebraska fans talk about Michigan's scandal. I'm like, brother, I lived in Nebraska for 10 years. I've heard a lot of stories about why they were so dominant in the trenches.
It wasn't just corn. It wasn't just growing up on, there definitely is something to that. But yeah, they weren't just breeding walk-ons that just happened to become, 6'5", 290.
But to that point on Nebraska football, and then we can move on. I think the one thing that has kind of, not allowed them to be as successful as they were in the past is because those types of players that they used to get in the 80s and 90s, now they're going to South and North Dakota State. They're going to Kansas and Kansas State. They're going out of state and they're going to play at the FCS level, or they're going to play in the, the Big 12. So, I don't know. Are Nebraska fans content with just not making a bowl game? And I want this to be known. My wife is a Nebraska alum. I have rooted for Nebraska. I have Nebraska shit in my closet. I will be a dick about this now because I think Matt Rule is a loser. I don't think he's a very good football coach. And I think he just makes a lot of excuses and he likes to whine. And this is now how many times he's talked about Michigan. Dude, Michigan, I was at that game last year. It was 28-0 in the first half. 3 of those touchdowns, like we talked about pre-show, one was J.J. McCarthy throwing it up to Roman Wilson, who made a ridiculous catch. The other was J.J. McCarthy scrambling for a touchdown. And the last touchdown before half was J.J. rolling out to his left, extending the play and finding Roman in the corner of the end zone. None of those were based upon, we knew that Nebraska was running cover 2, so we did this. It was all just Michigan has better football players and better coaches last year.
They didn't have a single person that could keep up with anybody on Michigan's team. Anybody. No. Also, that was Peyton O'Leary's first touchdown. So shout out.
It was beautiful from Jaden Denegal.
Denegal.
I listened to that one on the radio. I was out of there at that point because it was such an ass kicking, Matt, because your team was bad and you're a bad coach. Sorry. And they owe him $60 million still.
Listen, what? Yeah. All right. We don't need to waste more breath on Nebraska.
No, it's fine.
They're not worthy. Even though we're 5-5, I'm fine with that. They're still not worthy of us talking about them. Okay, I want to let's touch on Ohio State for a second before we go back to Nebraska, which I really, if I'm being honest, I don't have a whole lot to say about the Michigan Northwestern game this weekend. I just said
Yeah, I
Nebraska, didn't
don't.
I?
Yeah.
But before we talk
How much you
Northwestern,
respect Northwestern?
yeah, sorry, sorry. Well, I mean, I guess let me talk about Northwestern for 1 second. I think that they're cursed as well from firing Pat Fitzgerald. I know that that's like I guess it can be a touchy subject and stuff like that. I feel like I feel like he was a very good football coach. He's the perfect guy for Northwestern. There are a lot of things that happen that we probably don't know the full story of, right? But anytime I see the players like and other coaches supporting their coach that was just fired, then I feel like that the university was in the wrong. That's just how I feel. You saw it with Biff Poggi this weekend. He's fired, shows up to practice the next day, and the team goes crazy over him. So, who was it that actually showed up to like the walk on the way to the stadium this weekend as well, or this past weekend? There was a coach. There was a coach that got fired that right before the game, and then he showed up to like hug each player on their walk to the stadium. But anyways, I think that Northwestern, they're just going to be a bottom of the barrel Big Ten team. There's no way that program can be elite. With I don't know if they're going to have NIL money. They should, because they should have a shit ton of rich alums because it's a super smart school. Maybe the new stadium. The new stadium does look sick. I'll say that.
Dude, their practice facility on the lake is awesome. The new stadium looks like it's going to be awesome. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough. Like you see schools Northwestern has had some runs in its history. You look at the 90s when they went to the Rose Bowl. You look at the 2010s with Pat Fitzgerald when they were pretty competitive for a number of years. And there was a year where, they took Ohio State down to the wire in Evanston. And, I think they ended up losing a lot of games that year because of some injuries and things like that. But, they had Trevor Siemian, they had Clayton Thorson. There's another quarterback that was pretty good. So they have had the ability to kind of be like an average to above average team in the Big Ten. But yeah, I think I'm with you. Like, I think it's just really tough with all the teams that are in the Big Ten now. And it's such an arms race too, right? Like the big programs are always going to have an advantage, even more so than they have in the history of college football, just because of money. And when you think about, I've made this joke about Larry Page, and I don't like to spend other people's money, but he's a Michigan alum, founds Google, and doesn't care about football. Like there's a story out there that I've seen where he was at a Super Bowl party and he had to ask what the rules of football were. And that's all of Northwestern's donors.
Which is probably also why he was able to found Google.
Yeah. If I took my love of football towards anything to be an entrepreneur and be loaded. But that would be as fun as knowing ball.
As much as I would love him to, really be a diehard Michigan football fan, he did a decent thing by founding Google, and things worked out well for him.
Yeah. Can you imagine NIL deals with Google though? You just pump up your players. They just go to the front of every search. That's have you thought of Bryce Underwood when you searched whatever on Google? That'd be sweet.
It automatically came up as negative Brian Kelly and LSU articles all day long.
Brian Kelly is a clown, by the way.
Yeah,
kind of all over the place with this pod. But do you guys really want us to break down Northwestern?
Yeah, let's talk Underwood for a second.
I mean, let's do it, man. They lose to Catholic Central. Which is surprising. I mean, they hadn't lost that early since Bryce Underwood had been there. But yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know, man. I don't know anything, dude. I'm just I read the message boards. I'm just a guy. I read the message boards. I'm like, oh, hey, that's interesting. Yeah, it seems like it's over and then it's not. It's like it's
I
the
feel like it's a classic, just 18-year-old in this day and age. This is how it seems a lot of recruitments are going. Like, a commitment means nothing these days. It means less than it ever has at this point. You saw that with Ivan Taylor flipping from Michigan to Bama. Honestly, like in the past, that would phase me, right? I just don't think it phases me anymore because A, you can go get guys in the portal, right? B, it does, Michigan's working on flipping certain people. So that doesn't phase me. But I think that with Bryce Underwood, it feels like, you know, there's a ton of numbers being thrown around. I would say basically zero of them are accurate. And then I just think that, he doesn't know what he wants because he's 17 or 18 years old. At that point, I didn't know what I wanted, right? And when you have all these people in your ear, it's really difficult. So I think that what I will say is like LSU is doing as good of a job for Michigan as Michigan is doing in recruiting this kid, right? LSU falling apart right before our own eyes is probably the best thing that could happen to this. And it doesn't hurt that while they're falling apart on the field, Brian Kelly's on the sideline just cussing kids out. And it's like, I think that there are probably some people saying to Bryce Underwood or him seeing it himself, being like, do I really want to be that kid that's on the other end of that, earful from Brian Kelly? And then you add in the OC part where it sounds like, what is it, Joe Sloan, right? Joe Sloan is, rumored to take another job. And
which
so
if I'm ECU, which is the job because he's an ECU alum, I'm watching this offense. Like, I don't know, man. And if I'm LSU, like, yeah, you want Bryce Underwood, but like it's often like I watched a lot of that Florida game. They look like Michigan with more talent. Like they have more talent on the offensive side of the ball. They have actual receivers. They have Jason Taylor's son, who's a really good tight end.
Is there any? Let's actually this, but is there anybody on LSU's offense right now that wouldn't start for Michigan?
Probably not. I mean,
probably not.
I mean, and I was gonna say maybe Kalel, but like he struggled the last 3 games. So
I mean, there are guys that I think that would like rotate in probably, aka Kalel. I think that like
other than Colson Loveland.
Colson Loveland.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. I didn't even think about that because it's so obvious.
Right. Yeah. And then I think that like maybe a Preeb, right, or or a Hinton, I don't know, would get some run, but ultimately, to your point, like they have 100 times more talent, and they are struggling against a Florida team who, like, they're 14 days ago, having to put a statement out there that they're keeping their coach because of how bad it's been. Right.
And they got smoked by Texas. Like it was like 49-10 or something. And then they come and then I like DJ Lagway, by the way. If we're talking about quarterbacks, and I mean, obviously, his coach is staying, but I don't know. He made some plays where he stepped up in the pocket, found a receiver. Like I really like his game. I think he's going to be a really good college football quarterback. So, but yeah, I mean, LSU sitting at 6-4, man. Like, yeah, Michigan's 5-5. LSU sitting at 6-4. Michigan's had the opportunity to win some games. We talked about the IU game. That one still stings. The Oregon game could have kept it a lot closer. You never know what happens in a 1-possession game. Obviously, the Illinois Washington games are still kind of tough to stomach. But so LSU sitting there, and they beat their best win is either Ole Miss is certainly their best win. But then when you look at when they played South Carolina got screwed in that game. If you guys remember all the way back early in the season, they had a pick 6 get overturned for South Carolina, and that might have been a game. I think that would have put them up 2 scores, and that would have been a game that they could have lost. So they could also be sitting at 5-5 here.
So
having a great year for the Tigers.
Right. I'll say this. I think if LSU was even 10-2 right now, I think that this recruitment's probably over. If they're 10-2 with the offense looking decent and I would say that this recruitment's probably over. But I truly believe that LSU's ineptitude is like, is that a word?
Yes, ineptitude is a word.
Okay, cool. I wanted to make sure there.
Teaching you guys English on this podcast is great.
I-
I'm sure our viewers and listeners knew that was a word.
100%. I think that they're keeping Michigan in it because it doesn't look like they don't have their shit together. And I know that Michigan doesn't have their shit together, but right now, like, let's be honest, Tanner, Michigan's not going to fire Sharon right now, but
Sharon's going to fire some people.
Sharon is probably going to make some changes. And for like, this is kind of crazy to say with Sharon and with Michigan being at 5-5, but Michigan almost has more stability than LSU because Brian Kelly just like is Brian Kelly. LSU is LSU. They're never afraid to pay that buyout. Never. And so, like, if they struggle in these last few games, like, I don't know. I think that it just seems like there's a ton of uncertainty down there. And as sick as it is, I'm sure, to be the quarterback at LSU when they're really good, aka Joe Burrow, like it and Jaden Daniels, I think it's not that fun to be there when things aren't going well. And
well, yeah, and I'm with you, man. I think, when it comes to Bryce, you watch last year, Jaden Daniels just balls out, wins the Heisman. I think what we're seeing with his success in the NFL, and, they have a new coordinator from last year. Joe Sloan was promoted from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator when Denbrock left LSU to go to Notre Dame and be their OC this offseason. You're seeing that Jaden Daniels is the reason that offense went the last 2 years.
Right.
It was not anything that Brian Kelly or Joe Sloan had to do with. And you're looking at Garrett Nussmeier, who, coming into the season was projected as a top 5 quarterback in this draft class and has just not been good. And he struggles in the pocket. He doesn't have any pocket awareness. And so you watch this, you're like, well, do I want to go there and also be berated by Brian Kelly? Like, Brian Kelly looks like a clown all the time, but this Florida game was even worse. Like, it was not great. He's screaming at kids. Kids are coming up at him, screaming at him.
When are people gonna understand that he's a shitty person? Like,
He's a good football coach. He's a terrible human being.
But like, he's a good football coach in the way that Urban Meyer was a good football coach. That like, he's
without the success.
Right, exactly. Like but he loses games, right? Like, but it's the Urban culture, right? And it's hard for us to shit on Urban because of what he, the success he did have. But Brian Kelly's the same way, where he's just going to break kids down until they, don't know any better, and then they try to play. But like, I don't know, Urban somehow made that work, and guys did like him. I mean, I'm sure a ton of guys didn't, but it seems like more players don't like Brian Kelly than they do. So
yeah, I don't know. There's so many things about Brian Kelly. Obviously, what happened in Notre Dame when he was first there, that's just despicable, and just an unfortunate thing that nobody really took accountability for. I don't know.
Why does that not, like, that should be brought up at every
it's almost like a deep cut for some reason. Like, people like diehard college football fans know that and remember that. I feel like that should be just out in the open more. Like, he made the decision to send the kid up in the scissor lift with 60-mile-an-hour winds, and that kid's no longer here.
He should have been fired that day, honestly.
Like, Notre Dame, they have morals, and that relates to winning football games.
Crazy.
This is obviously not on that level, and that's a serious subject, and we're not trying to make light of it at all because it's, again, disgusting. But I think it's hilarious that he broke Knute Rockne's record and then left immediately, and Notre Dame fans hate that he's the most winning football coach in Notre Dame's history. They loathe it.
I mean, that is true. That's really funny, actually, because it's like, oh, our most winning coach in history, like, we hate him. He didn't win us shit, actually, and he's a shitty person, and then he immediately left for, because Notre Dame fans for sure think that they're still like the premier job. Right? Like, somebody saying that LSU is a better job than Notre Dame, that's gotta like just irk every Irish fan ever, right?
Yeah, Notre Dame's a fantastic job, but I think LSU is a better job, just because I think it's, you're a tougher conference, but you have more resources and you have less restrictions on recruiting and who you can recruit. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just couldn't imagine wanting to play for Brian Kelly. If it were a handful of other schools, I would totally understand. I would totally get it. But with it being LSU, LSU without Brian Kelly, I get it too. Like if this was, hey, this is.
But also the SEC is like it's the same as the Big Ten now, right? Where it's like, okay, I know LSU, I'm sure, would be a top whatever school in the SEC, but it got way harder once you added Texas and Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma's struggling right now, but I'm sure they're going to be back. I think I'm just saying, like it, 5 years ago, you're like, oh yeah, LSU is like, they're the top of the SEC, but it's that much harder. So I don't know, man. I do see it a little bit like if Underwood does go to LSU, it feels like Jaden Daniels, where like they really don't win anything of importance, and he's kind of running for his life a lot, making crazy plays. Like that's kind of how I see it. So, I mean, Bryce, if you're listening to this, we do have we have the answers for you.
Yeah, and Bryce, I'm not a reactionary Michigan fan, so don't worry about it. I won't freak out at any drop of the hat. You know what I mean? I'm pretty even keel.
Yeah, well, nobody like you definitely, along with a lot of other people, aren't like scrolling the message board every day just for a little bit of.
Oh, and not even every day, brother. I'm on there like, oh, I did a 30 minute 1 hour long meeting. Let me go back and check 247, see what's going on, see what the boys are saying. But that's just because I love recruiting. I do that regardless of who Michigan could be after the worst class in history, and I'd be like, what's going on? What's going on with this? What's going on with this 2-star? What's going on with him? I'm a sicko.
All right, talking about Ohio State, since we've got that game in 10 days now. So Seth McLaughlin tears his Achilles. Ohio State center, if you remember that name, that was the Alabama center from the Rose Bowl who couldn't get a snap up because he was so scared of Michigan's defensive line. I'm not going to clown on him for this. This sucks for them. Like, I hate injuries. Yeah. We went through it with Zach Zitter last year. It's obviously just when you're trying to win a national title and something like this happens, it is devastating. So not trying to clown on them or on him for any reason, but just trying to evaluate what that means now for Michigan in this game in 10 days. So now Ohio State is down, essentially their two best linemen that they started the year with, right?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Simmons goes down against Oregon, their left tackle, who had been playing really, really well. Seth McLaughlin had also been playing really good football. And so now this is where it tests your depth, right? Like, this is what we talk about with Ohio State. Like, do you have the guys up front? And yeah, you could have a good starting five, but it's football. You see it with the Lions, right? Like and in college football, you can't go make a midseason trade, unfortunately. So, you may have a lot of good, talented players up front, but an injury here or there, and it really is going to test, how you built your roster. So I don't know what the depth looks like for Ohio State, but it's a big loss. It's a really big loss, and so.
Well, I think especially if you're talking specifically for the Michigan Ohio State game, it's a big loss because that's obviously Michigan's strength is the D line that's lining up right across from them, right? So
absolutely.
So I think that when you are going to now have a backup center in that with only 10 days of experience essentially as the starting center, and a lot of that is trying to last second game prep for Indiana, which is, I know Indiana's defense is not, their strength, but you have a top 5 matchup this weekend, right? So it's not like he has 10 days just to focus on Michigan. So, all of a sudden he's got to prep for Indiana. Then on Sunday, turn around, prep for Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Rayshon Benny. And so I don't know, like, I just think that is a real blow to Ohio State. And it's, I guess unfortunate to say this, but it's an opportunity for Michigan to making huge impact on that game, which, before this and still does, like Michigan wasn't looking like they had a chance in that game against Ohio State, right? Now it opens up a window. I don't know if it increases, from 5% chance to 15% chance or what. Like, obviously it's going to be an uphill battle, but if Michigan can take advantage of the backup center on the D line and get pressure and stop the run, we know from this year what the importance is in having a good center, right? And so they're going to have to figure that out really quickly.
Well, and as we know, we talk about football, we talk about offensive line play, the center is the guy making the calls up front. So when you 12 weeks into the season have to replace that guy who was a very experienced football player, has played a lot of football in the SEC, he's played a lot for Ohio State this year. When you have to replace a guy like that, that's gonna stress your offensive line's ability to pick up blitzes, to pick up stunts.
It's not on the same page. Talent. Like, I think that's what people don't fully understand, and I honestly think that's been the bigger issue for Michigan's offensive line this year. Is yes, are they under talented? They're not nearly as talented as last year, but it's been more communication issues, right? Like the times that Davis Warren is sacked or a hole doesn't open up for a run, it hasn't been guys getting completely blown up. I know Evan Link has on a number of times for sure, but it's been more so you see two guys not blocking anybody, and their two guys, their two defenders are behind them getting to the quarterback. So
yeah, and we've been spoiled the last 3 seasons with our boy Andrew Vistardis. Shout out Andrew Vistardis. What a human being. I mean, he comes up to me at the tailgates. I'm like, dude.
I mean, it is pretty awesome to have Vistardis just casually come to the tailgates, and
we need to get him on the pod and just talk ball. Like, because he was a really smart guy. Like, I believe he walked on to Michigan, but I think he had an offer from Northwestern, if I remember from his recruiting days. So, very smart guy. He's going to medical school, but like, you think about your center, you want him to be extremely smart. That's what Olu was, and that's what Drake Nugent was. Dude, you just think about those three guys, right? Andrew Vistardis is in medical school currently. Olu Oluwatimi started at the Naval Academy, and Drake Nugent comes from Stanford. And so those three guys were all extremely good football players, but they were even better at just communicating, picking up things, understanding the game. Like Olu, he's starting with the Seahawks now. I mean, honestly, not because he's a big, strong dude, right? He's a very good run blocker. But if you were just to take Olu's smarts and put him on the current center, like, I think it would be a night and day difference, honestly. Yes. And that's not to disparage anybody that's on this team, but it's just a different level.
And not even just smarts, but you mentioned it earlier, it's the experience. It is knowing what you're seeing at this time and what that means you have to do, right?
Yeah, just like anything you do in life. If for those of us that just work, like, the more times you do something, the more you're able to understand, okay, this is probably what's going to happen, or this is probably what this person is looking for. It's the same thing in football, right? You pick up on tendencies, you see something, you're familiar with the situation, and you've got a really good chance of being correct if because you've seen it so many times.
Yes, agreed 100%. I think that it's I don't know, man. I think that it opens up a window of opportunity for Michigan is all I'm saying. And again, very, very unfortunate for the kid. I feel for him because, obviously Michigan ended his season last year and things did not go well for him. I'm sure he had this Michigan game circled since that Rose Bowl as like, hey, I got to go back and beat these guys and redeem myself. And now he doesn't get a chance to. So, I'd rather him get the chance to, but I think now if you're Wink Martindale, you have to look at this opportunity and say, all right, how are we going to go and attack this backup center? Because
I know.
Go for it.
You put Mason Graham at the 7 tech.
Yes. You just
put him at the 9.
Don't let that center.
Please, Wink, please. Wink, I am begging you, please do not do anything but line Mason Graham and Kenneth Crane up front. You want to run stunts, that's totally fine. You need to take advantage of this unfortunate situation.
I think you, especially at the beginning of that game, just have those guys. The whole goal is don't even let that center lift up his head before he's getting mauled. He is getting murdered before his head even gets up. And that's when those guys, like the center position, first of all, incredibly difficult. It is so hard
It's flying at you.
Like to have to think about the snap as you're the one directing, you're calling the essentially the play at the line, you're calling the formation, the shift, all that, and then you have to think about, all right, I got to get the snap up and immediately block somebody. It's really, really hard. And hence why Seth McLaughlin struggled last year, because Michigan's D line was just like, they had their ears pinned back and he couldn't even think about the snap because he was thinking about trying to block Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, which is very fucking hard to do. So
absolutely.
So yeah, so we'll see. Obviously, I have no idea what Ohio State's backup center looks like, but it can't be as good as Seth McLaughlin because they had to go get somebody in the portal, aka him, right? So they felt that was a need. So yeah, opens up an opportunity for Michigan to see what they can do. I wanted to touch on Mikey Sainer still for a second in the program. I mean, just like Mikey Sainer still is finally getting, not finally, but he is already getting recognition in the pros. He's a captain midway through his rookie year.
Have you considered the signs though? I just want to make sure. Yeah, he's playing really good football. I mean, he looks like he did at Michigan playing the nickelback position. Like, I mean, just really good, just a really good football player, and just really happy to see him playing well. Just anytime a Michigan, guy is playing well in the pros, you're excited. So, yeah, that's phenomenal. I mean, just a great leader, just a great kid, and just was really glad that he played at Michigan, and really glad that they decided to switch him from receiver to slot corner, because that was the national championship move right there, right? Like, literally, I think if you don't have him there, I don't know if Michigan gets it done. And he was kind of that piece last year. He was the leader of the defense. He was the glue, and probably honestly the best player. Like, just pound for pound,
all around.
He did. Yeah, I mean, there's guys that are probably there are certainly guys that are gonna be drafted higher than him on that defense, but he just made that thing go round and was just, again, I mean, had the interception at the end of the national championship. It was very fitting. So I got a lot of love in my heart for number 0.
He still should have scored on that. I'm still mad that he didn't score.
Well, Braden McGregor just didn't block.
I mean, you got to block, Braden. Come on, dude.
But yeah, he's just a great representative of the program, and I got a lot of love for Zero, man. He's just a great football player. Seems like a great dude.
Great dude, super smart. I think that just like he is, a lot of people have said it online, but he is like on the Mount Rushmore. I think if you like, Saban calling him pound for pound the best cornerback in college football or in the draft, and I mean, everything he did for the program, he truly is like, he's up there with Hutch in terms of turning it around culture wise. Was there when it was shitty, right? Like, got through it, did whatever the team needed to. I think that if I was a coach, if I was Sharon, if I was any coach in college football, I would literally look at him and be like, we need to find our Mikey Sainer still. Like, that's every year. Like, who's going to be our Sainer still this year? And that's like, if I'm Sharon, that's what I got to go look at in recruiting, in the portal, whatever. Yes, you need talent, but Michigan won off of talent for sure in 2023, but they won because of guys like Mikey being Mikey. And it's honestly hard to explain, right? Because I think you don't know what that guy looks like until you see it, right? It's hard to like, put it into words what all he does. And so that's what I just wanted to touch on that, because I think that like we're missing that this year. I think that there are a lot, like, I think Max Bredesen is a guy that has stepped into that role in terms of leadership. It's hard to do, on an offense that struggles, I think, just in general. But you need guys like Mikey Sainer still, and I think that that's what Michigan should be focused on more than anything moving forward.
You got to have a good mix, right? You got to have guys like Mikey who, is just a complete diamond in the rough. I mean, I remember when Sam Webb started talking about him. This might have been in 2018, dude. Like, I hadn't even met my wife. Like, this is that long ago. And he's talking about, this kid, Mike Sainristil, and I was trying to figure out how to pronounce his name. And he was committed to Virginia Tech. And, he was supposed to flip in the summer of 2018. And then he doesn't. And then he flips like during the season. I was like, oh, I forgot about that guy. They're like, he's an athlete, plays both ways. He starts at receiver. He has a big touchdown against Notre Dame. 2020, he has some nice catches. 2021, he has huge plays throughout the season at receiver. And then they switch him to, because that time Michigan had depth at receiver. So they're like, hey, let's try this guy.
Crazy.
Yeah, like shout out Josh Gaddis for that at least.
Yeah.
And then they flip him to defense, and it's like it's just crazy to think about his trajectory at Michigan, and just I remember his recruitment, like, and it was so long ago, and I just remember like, oh, he's probably a good football player, and man, like shout out to Don Brown for that, by the way, because he's a mass guy. I think Don Brown gets a bad rap. It certainly didn't end very well in the last 2 Ohio State games, but he brought some dogs in from the Northeast, man.
Well, and speaking of Don Brown and Biff Poggi, how about both of them getting fired this week? I think that, Don Brown, if Don Brown just like
adapted, cover 2 a couple times a game,
like literally adapted a little bit, he would still be the DC at Michigan probably. Or at least he would have not been fired in, what was it, 2020.
Yeah. Worked out for us.
Obviously, it worked out for Michigan. Jesse Minter is incredible.
I once again ask, have you considered the signs?
Mike McDonald's incredible.
The Chargers are 7-3 in the NFL, and yeah, you can say they haven't played anybody, but I don't care. It's the NFL. It's the same thing with the Lions. Oh, you beat the Jaguars. You don't score 50 points in the NFL. Just like you don't do what the Chargers are doing a year after being one of the worst teams defensively in the NFL. They are the best team defensively. That is Jesse Minter, my friends, and he is going to be a head coach very, very soon.
And Jim Harbaugh, just like being Jim Harbaugh, which is
he's got the Chargers singing "Jolly Good Fellow." It makes me sad. Honestly,
I feel like I'm watching my ex-girlfriend on like Instagram stories, and she's just like partying, having the greatest time of her life, and I'm sitting in my house.
I'm Squidward in the meme, and,
yes.
and Jesse Minter and Jim Harbaugh are SpongeBob and Patrick running around.
Correct. I wouldn't mind. I don't know about Don Brown. Don Brown probably it's probably time to retire, I would say. But I did see, I don't know if you saw this, his wife put out a tweet that they had like $36,000 total in NIL money, and the combination of teams that they played this year was like 36 million or something like that. So there was something that she said there. But honestly, what they need to do is bring Biff Poggi back. That is like, if I was Sharon, I mean, let's be honest, Harbaugh's probably already called him and he's like on a plane to LA. If we know anything about
he's
Jim
done
Harbaugh.
Enough, Jim.
He has done enough.
Stop it.
Stop. You're good. You're good. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. But like, Sharon needs to make that a priority, because it's obvious that I mean, Biff, if you don't know this by now, Biff was an incredibly important piece to Michigan turning it around. There's no doubt about that. I mean, yes, they got good players, but it was the leading by example. He's the only guy that Jim Harbaugh would listen to. Jim Harbaugh is a stubborn man. Jim Harbaugh knows a lot about football, knows a lot about building culture and building teams. He was the only guy in 2020 and leading into 2021. Biff was the only man that Harbaugh listened to, and in my opinion, the biggest reason for the turnaround. Because Jim Harbaugh had, for the first time, I think, in like his career, did some looking in the mirror and like, hey, what we're doing is not working. Instead of being like, no, what we're doing is the way I've done it before, and we can keep doing it. And he completely changed in the fact that he made it a players program instead of a Jim Harbaugh program. And that was what changed. And yes, it was Jim Harbaugh still leading it and doing what he did. he was still the same Jim Harbaugh as we heard players say years, time after time again. But for the first time in a long time, it was the player's idea to lead, not Jim Harbaugh's idea. And that was all Biff Poggi. And so I think that hiring Biff as like an associate head coach would be the best move that Sherrone Moore could make.
Yeah, I would love to see Biff come back in some capacity as the associate head coach. I think it would be a great move and give him some more help. I think what's going to probably need to happen, at least for the time being, is that Sherrone's going to need to bring in coordinators who can kind of just spend on their own, and he needs to truly be a CEO and take a lot off of his plate. Be a CEO and help with the offensive line, and I think we're cooking with some oil here. So, I would love to see Biff come back. And I wanted to make a comment on your point about UMass football. Like Marcus Camby like football, maybe he got some NBA money he can use for NIL. Like Julius Erving played there too. Dr. J. I don't know.
I feel
that's
like
crazy. $36,000.
Did you find the tweet?
No, but that's just crazy.
It was. Let me see.
This is great podcasting, by the way.
This is fantastic podcasting.
We should probably end here soon once we get this from Don Brown's significant other, but. Come out to the tailgate. We're gonna have some Sun Cruiser, some Truly, some Hale IPA, some Blue by 90 Ale, game day ale. We're gonna be there Saturday. We're gonna set up around 8 in the morning. The last game of the year at home. Crazy to think football season's gone by so quick, man. Thankfully the NFL is gonna run for another 3 months, and the Detroit Lions are gonna be playing for another 3 months. But it's sad. Even with the rough season, it's sad because then you got to wait again until next year. So,
all right, I can't find it. So this is really good.
This
podcast.
is great. No, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm sure nobody's even listening at this point anymore.
I agree. I mean, most people have tuned out, which I don't blame you.
Background noise.
This is 5-5 podcasting. We had a lot more fun things to talk about last year at this. You want to know what's crazy is. Think about we still had 5 more games left last year. We had from November 20th, we had 2 months of football left. That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done. All right, I'm done. It's depressing me. So thank you to Truly and Sun Cruiser. Thank you to North Peak and Hale IPA. Go get yourself a Hale IPA this weekend and drink. I mean, you're probably, that's probably the best move this weekend is what I would say. Michigan Northwestern at 3:30. Come out to the tailgate, say hi to the boys. For us, you can follow us at blueby90.com. Wait, did I fuck it up? For us, you can follow Blue by 90. Oh no. I've lost it. For us, you can follow us at blueby90.com. Blue by 90. Oh my God. Blue by 90 podcast at YouTube. And for us, you can follow us at Blue by 90 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Blue by 90 podcast on YouTube, and blueby90.com. We appreciate you. Go Blue. There we go.
Go Blue.